when it comes to purchasing property in Florida, because different things to consider versus what you guys do over there in Canada.
Over the last 10 years, I want to say there's been a new interest in a hybrid between personal use and investment use. There's more opportunity than just the traditional buy, hold, and rent.
Increased mortgage rates hovering at 7%, increased insurance, increased taxes. And it's like, holy shit, can I afford this one?
If somebody wants to buy a condo, this is a good time because it's a total buyer's market.
Vito and Anna, why did I come here all the way from Canada? I'm going to give you a couple statistics. Well, 3.2 million Canadians visit Florida every single year. There's 500,000 Canadians who own property in Florida. 95% of those properties were bought as cash deals, so no mortgage. There's obviously a huge interest when it comes to Canadians and Florida, specifically South Florida, the way that the economy has been growing and the population has been growing here in South Florida. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Tell everybody who you are and what you guys do.
My name is Vito and this is Anna, and we lead the Vito and Anna team at Compass. We're real estate advisors here in South Florida. Collectively, we have 10 plus years of full-time experience selling real estate. I'm originally from Toronto. I've been down here for about 20 years now, actually this May. So it feels like yesterday that I moved down here.
Yeah.
And we lead a small team selling real estate South Florida. That's, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties. I look at going north to south. We're centrally based in Fort Lauderdale, kind of right in the middle of it. And our team sort of covers north and south and then east to west. And we'll talk a little bit about areas and things like that.
My name is Anna. I am part of the Vito and Anna team. And I'll just add to what Vito said, we work a lot with Canadians. We have a big pool of buyers that are Canadians, whether they're investing or they're getting second homes here. So we do have a lot of experience with what Canadians are looking for and kind of like the challenges that are presented for a Canadian buyer and some things that maybe Canadian really thinking about when it comes to purchasing property in Florida, because it is a little bit different. There's different things to consider versus what you guys do over there in Canada.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about 95% of these transactions being cash. The question is always, are they really cash or are they financing it using their primary property in Canada,
right,
taking it off a line of credit? Florida tends to be a very cash heavy environment in residential. I think about 50% of deals are cash, or very close to it. And, a lot of it is, did they use cash or did they just waive financing contingency? It's interesting that in Toronto, in the GTA, the realtors associations there don't track or don't provide metrics on cash or non-cash transactions.
Right. You can infer from the bank data and from deal flow, but you're right. I don't think they do track it as tightly as they do here. Right. So what I wanted to cover though today specifically when it comes to Canadians purchasing property in Florida, traditionally you've had two types of people making these investments, right? One, it's going to be your typical snowbirds, right? Mm-hmm. People that want to come down to Florida, they want to enjoy the weather, they want to enjoy the dining, entertainment, whatever it is. They're attracted to South Florida for a specific reason personally. So these people are going to be looking for properties for their own personal use, for their family and whatnot. Then you've also had capitalists, right? People that are looking to invest, looking to make a return on investment. This is what I deal with more so in my business, being a tax and financial advisor in Toronto. I can tell you anecdotally that there is a huge interest amongst my client base, which is going to be considered the high net worth client base in Toronto, looking south of the border, specifically to the state of Florida, specifically to this area. We're in beautiful Fort Lauderdale, but they're also looking all around the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. Over the last 10 years, I want to say there's been a new interest in sort of a hybrid between personal use and investment use, that being, let's call it short-term rentals. So with the rise of platforms like Airbnb, Vrbo, and such, you have the opportunity for people that are not ultra high net worth, that can't necessarily afford to have a home for themselves for personal use, but can afford to have a home that they somewhat use once in a while and supplement the operating costs by renting it out short term. So it's sort of a new area. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk to the two of you about purchasing a home as a Canadian, where to look, what do I got to think about if it's a personal use home, transitioning that home into a short-term rental. I know that it's not a huge area of your practice, but I still want to know what you guys know about it. And I want to dive into pure investment. My understanding, I'm sitting here in your brand new home that you guys built. There's more opportunity than just the traditional buy, hold, and rent sort of deal. There's also opportunity to build, modify, and make money that way. So if we can touch on those three things, personal use, hybrid use, and investment, that would be great. Start with purchasing a home for yourself. Really, the Fort Lauderdale area, I'm sure, is what you guys know the best, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is where we live and this is where we do a lot of our business. We're familiar with the other areas, but for sure, we can talk like from A through Z about Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah,
So,
especially like now we're definitely finding that we're working more hyper locally. I remember when I first started in real estate, and don't get me wrong, we still work that South Florida market well for our clients because, Canadians are buying all over. They want Miami, they want Palm Beach, Delray, Boca. It's always a lifestyle budget choice depending on what their needs are or their desires are. And we'll talk a little bit about those as we dive in. But I remember driving to Naples to set up a new listing because we were new and kind of just had to like follow the money, right? And do whatever deals we could do.
Right.
But now as we've started working closer to home, it's getting a little bit more hyper local. Recently built our own home and we started working with a few developers. We represent 3 development companies that are building single family homes in a pretty small community in East Fort Lauderdale. So we're starting to become experts in that while continuing to service traditional buyers and sellers.
Where are you guys seeing like the deal flow happening when it comes to Canadians in this area? Is it like right here in Fort Lauderdale or somewhere on the outskirts?
no, I mean, I really think that people want to be east. I mean, I don't think Canadians want to come to then be 45 minutes from the beach, right? So
Right.
I think a lot of where people want to be is closer to the water. So I would say like 2-mile radius to the beach is where we see a lot of where the Canadians want to be at and purchase these homes. There's no point of going out west for somebody because it's not close to the beach, and you have the suburbs and you're going to have more like families. You don't have as much like action restaurants or whatever. So I definitely think it's east of 95. Let's just say east of 95 and even more so east of US 1, which then gets you really close to the beach. But the price points, the more east you go, the higher the price point kind of.
So
goes.
clearly
Ultimately, it's like, where can they afford to be? We have clients who have purchased out west 30 minutes from the beach and they're happy there. And that was the price point that, they could get into, right? The closer you want to be to the water and to the sand, the more it's going to cost you. Obviously, then you get into the whole single family homes versus condominiums.
Right.
There's a big stretch here in Fort Lauderdale Beach called the Gulf Ocean Mile between basically Commercial Boulevard and Oakland Boulevard on the sand that's heavily populated with snowbirds and mostly Canadians. There was a few years back where they put banners up on A1A that in November saying, "Welcome back, Woodbridge."
Huh.
So they're there. The wealthy Canadians that are in Fort Lauderdale have condos right on the sand.
Right.
And these condos, it's a lifestyle. You're spending top dollar on maintenance, on taxes, beautifully renovated units. But when you leave, you lock it up. And
These
you
are
go and there's
strictly
nothing
personal.
to take care of.
They're
right?
strictly personal
Right.
use. There's no like hybrid investment. It's just strictly personal use.
Yeah,
So
because they're restricted, right? The condos, you don't want a Airbnb tenant next door to you
Obviously.
when you're in a residential building. for the maybe 75% that are seasonal, there's probably still 25% of full-time people that live, maybe even more. Maybe it's 50-50. I don't know what the
So when you're
exact
saying
numbers are.
condos like close to the beach or maybe even on the beach, we're pretty close to the beach here, right?
Oh yeah,
We can walk to the beach.
can walk.
Most of my clients, especially the older ones who are successful, who have been successful financially, they buy like right on the beach. And they have these beautiful condos. My understanding is that owning a condo, I have a couple condos in Toronto. I have nothing here. My understanding is owning a condo here is a lot different than owning a condo in Toronto, specifically when it comes to insurance, costs, condo fees, whatever you guys call it here,
Look,
and then property tax.
We're
right?
more prone to natural disasters. Like
Right.
clearly hurricane season comes, insurance requirements for that are costly as you're seeing more natural disasters. Yeah, I think I read something that there was another 15% insurance increase rate. That doesn't matter if it's a condo or a single family home.
So it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Taxes, it's irrelevant. Although somebody just told me that a house on the water pays a little bit of a higher millage on the tax rate than a house not on the water. I believe it,
Right.
but I don't think it's like substantial. We typically tell our buyers to plan for about 1.8 to 2% of the purchase price in taxes. You got to watch out because it's misleading. You look at a homesteaded owner, so you have somebody who owned the property for 20 years.
Right.
But that they're Florida residents. That's
Florida.
what homestead it means, because
Okay.
I'm sure.
Yeah, Florida resident. So if
Yeah.
you're a resident of Florida, you can homestead your property. And what that does is it caps the amount that they can increase your taxes every year. And it
Gives you a little bit of a break, even though it's not that significant.
Little bit of a
when
break
you
on-
go to luxury, but
Right.
exactly, right? So you got to look at, some people will look at what the taxes are
and they're like, oh, it's
currently
cool, it's
and think,
fine,
oh, this isn't that bad.
easy. Yeah.
And then boom, 18
get
months
hit with the
later,
bill.
you get
Okay.
you get reassessed and you get a rude awakening, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a client who built a house and, purchased a piece of land for, I don't know, about $1 million, let's just say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put another $1 million in change in it, not being homesteaded, and is probably looking at a $75,000 tax bill. So I know you guys in the GTA aren't used to these.
No. We don't pay that kind of
taxes, right?
property tax. No.
And being that home prices have increased so much in the last 3 to 5 years, let's say, the taxes have increased with them.
Right.
It's an affordability thing. And
Right.
forget about the Canadians, right? Even local resident buyers are now faced with increased mortgage rates hovering at like 7%,
Right.
increased insurance, increased taxes. And now it's like, holy shit, can I afford this home?
Right. I guess then from the lifestyle perspective, right, it's a lot of people that live in the Northern Hemisphere, not just in Canada, but like
Of
Yeah.
course.
in the North, they're like, damn, I want to go to Florida, beautiful weather, whatever. So the condo is an attractive option, right? So regardless of whether it's a condo or a home, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got to figure what's going on in terms of the ongoing costs, because
Yeah.
we know that there's no state income tax in the state
No.
of Florida.
Which for some of the snowbirds in the northern states, that's like amazing, right?
Right.
So for them coming down here, it might actually be cheap.
Right. But now if you're just going back and forth though, and you are not a resident of Florida, then you do have to watch out, because my understanding then, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you could be subject to rapid increases in your property taxes to a
Yes.
certain
Yes.
extent.
They're still
Yes.
capped, but they're capped at a
At a higher
rate. So
Okay.
it's like 5% versus 3 or 2.75
Yeah.
Okay.
or whatever it is.
So,
right?
so
But
we do have to be wary of that. So let's say a typical Canadian buyer with a budget of somewhere between 750 grand to 1.5 million. Let's say using $1 million so that the math
yeah,
is
you got
easy
about
for us.
you got about $20,000.
$20,000 in property
taxes,
tax, right? Then let's throw on, let's say it's just a cash deal. Imagine cash deal, $1 million, pop it down. They don't have to do anything to the condo. They're looking at 20 grand a year in terms of property tax. What else? We have insurance and we have,
Yeah. So your insurance is typically rolled into your condo maintenance fee,
okay.
which is the challenge now since we had the collapse of the building in Surfside
Okay.
a couple years back now. There was some laws that were instituted, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with the attorney. I think
Yeah.
we have a little bit of time to get in deep on it. But essentially, think about inflation, right? think about how the condos kind of created their budgets.
Right.
And some of these older condos that were built in the 50s, 60s,
Yeah, their reserve
70s.
might be missing out or whatever.
or they might have no reserves.
Yeah,
at
no
all.
reserves, or reserves are weak, and no reserves then create another problem with lenders not wanting to take on the risk of giving a loan to a conventional buyer buying with a mortgage.
Right.
So that's another reason why you see a lot of these as cash deals. Right?
Okay.
Because they're like a little bit more challenging to get financing on.
I get it.
The financing falls through because there's this whole other list of 25 questions that the bank wants to go through and scrutinize on. How many owners are investors? Is there active litigation? It's all risk management on the financial institution side.
Right. So that's why we're getting
so
a
like
lot of
carrying,
cash
as
deals.
far as like carrying costs for the condos, like you have like your HOA fees, right? So your HOA fees are going to vary depending on amenities, depending on the age of the condo, depending on a lot of things. I think most condos on the beach, you're looking at somewhere like close to $1,000, if not more.
On how
per
many
month.
On how many square feet would you say?
I would say
say on 1,000 square feet to use round
Yeah.
numbers, right?
Okay.
That's
So
like
a buck a square
buck a
foot
square
per month.
foot,
Yeah.
maybe just to start, and that's
Minimal.
minimal. Like they're just going up from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then obviously the newer the building, like if you jump into one of these like brand new luxury buildings like Auberge or the Four Seasons or the new Ritzes, like
There's all kinds of like amenities and
But
whatnot.
you have more amenities, right? So it comes with the amenities and stuff. But
you get what you
it's-
pay for.
And
Yeah.
in that, you have your insurance. So the building insures itself for everything.
Okay.
And then the owner would only have to insure for the interior. So the
For content.
contents,
Okay.
which is not, it's not like super expensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then obviously the newer the building, the insurance is going to be more affordable because you have all brand new hurricane impact windows.
Yeah.
The plumbing's brand new. You don't have any risks of like concrete deterioration.
Got it.
So
And then also,
it's
I
a
think
teeter-totter, right?
I think
We're going to pay
people-
more for the
people
unit.
need to consider like these older condos also come with potential special assessments, right? Because
Right.
there's improvements that have to be done by all the law changes that we have. So a lot of times these things, unless you kind of like dig for them, they're not always like fully available and disclosed. They are obligated to disclose any current already proposed assessments, but
Okay.
you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper. So that's also something that like the price might be perfect, but then in the back end, you have like a $25,000, $30,000 special assessment coming in.
Right.
So I
in the
mean,
next
like even
couple of months.
just listening to this, right? I'm walking in with $1 million, getting excited, saying, "Hey, I got the money, or I got the financing somehow to buy this $1 million condo, beautiful view, let's say, whatever, somewhere around 800 square feet, 1,000 square feet tops." I'm already, just with what you guys are talking about, I'm already budgeting without a mortgage, without any financing costs, almost $3,000 a month, just in HOA fees, insurance, and property taxes,
That's
right?
about right.
Yeah, and
Just-
you could get an older building, nice floor, nice view right here, Fort Lauderdale Beach, decent amenities, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I don't know, call it like 12, 13, 1,400 square feet.
A little bit of older buildings
good
with
size
bigger,
of
right?
building. Maybe it's already gone through the first or second phase of restoration. A lot of the buildings are kind of catching up now.
Right.
Because they have to.
Right, because they have to, right? By law, by 2025, they have to have a plan and be fully caught up with collecting for full reserves.
I got it. I got it.
Is the big thing. So the condo market is really shaky right now. In fact, if you look at inventory in the condo market, it's gone up 90% in the last 12 months.
Oh, so inventory has been going up,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a ton of inventory in condos.
and
So
no one's buying.
I think if somebody wants to buy a condo, this is a good time because it's a total buyer's market. You can
Right.
go in and things are sitting on the market. And
Right.
if somebody's motivated enough, I think you can definitely, get a
Right.
deal potentially.
Okay.
Yeah, let me pull up a couple stats.
Yeah. Pull up.
Because I think that is important.
I mean, we have a mutual client that condo, not here in Fort Lauderdale, Miami.
This is the latest and greatest.
Okay, give me
Off
give
of
me an
the-
actual numerical example
The
here.
May 2024 South Florida. So this is condos in Palm Beach, Miami, Broward.
Okay.
So it's not just the beachfront stuff. So this is diluted with smaller condominiums and townhomes
But like within proximity to the beach, kind of.
This is countywide,
Okay, countywide. Okay.
tri-countywide.
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Condo inventory is up 90%. So we're sitting on 7.8 months supply of inventory
Okay.
since May of 2023.
Okay.
Right? So just so everybody kind of understands, the month supply of inventory is basically how long it will take to sell off the current active inventory at the current sales rate.
Oh, wow.
So typically when we look at it, less than 5 months of active inventory on the market is a seller's market.
Okay.
5 to 6 is a balance market. Anything above 6, it's a buyer's market.
Okay.
Interesting thing though is, closed sales are down about 10%. So there's still transactions. 4,200 a year ago, 3,760 this year in May of just the 1 month, right?
Right.
Cash sales as a percentage of closed transactions down about 4%, but still 54%.
So still
Right.
majority are cash transactions.
Majority are cash. The median sales price is actually up 7%, 355,000. That's low, right?
Right.
Remember what I talked about? This is all condos and townhomes,
Right.
tri-county wide. If you break the 3 counties up, the numbers are relatively the
Right.
same. But if you want to start looking at on the sand, real estate's hyper local, right? Every neighborhood is going to be different. We can always dive into any of those.
Well, one of the questions I have for you guys, that just came up. So we have what appears to be, from that one metric, the inventory on hand and the time to sell that inventory at the current rate. It looks like a buyer's market, but is it at all possible, and we may not have the data, but anecdotally from what you guys are seeing, is it at all possible that the inventory is there because people are just putting their heels in the ground and saying, this is the price I want and I'm not going to sell it? Or are they
100%.
dropping the price over time?
Yeah, I mean,
Prices aren't dropping. You're seeing reduction. Sorry.
well, yeah, I mean, you're seeing reductions, but I think people are used to that, like,
Right.
boom that we had, right? Like that, like crazy times where you could pretty much name your price and somebody was going to come and pay it because
Right.
everybody wanted to come to Florida during the pandemic. So I think a lot of people are still kind of like stuck on that.
And they don't want to lose, or
this
they
is
want
what
to
I
make
want,
their money.
right? But I mean, right now that's not the case anymore.
Okay.
Look, I think we're at this inflection point where I think sellers are digging their heels in, buyers are digging their heels
Yeah.
in,
Nothing's moving.
and
Deals aren't happening.
they're moving. Look, but the
They're happening just at a much, much slower rate than we were used to.
median time to contract is up 45%. Okay. So we're from 30 days to get a contract to 45 days in condos.
Right.
But median sales price from a year ago, still up 7%.
Okay.
So
The deals
value-
that are closing are closing at a decent price for the seller.
but there's, and condos are a little bit different. Maybe people will renovate more because they're cash. They're not dependent on a mortgage. Single family homes, they're still heavy in cash. But, we see buyers not willing to pay a premium for a unit that needs work.
Right.
Especially when there's financing involved. Imagine you're putting everything together to save for 20% down.
Yeah.
And then you got to go in and put a new roof in and windows
Yeah.
after, right? You can't finance that.
Yeah.
Versus getting something that's
Yeah.
turnkey that you can move right in. They'll pay a premium for it, and they'll pull the trigger on it. 2 years ago, anything was selling. Like,
Yeah.
any condo in any condition. I remember walking in to a closing for a listing that I had, and this condo was like very difficult to sell in that market. Can't even imagine trying to sell it now. And the buyers bought it sight unseen on a
Right.
FaceTime, and they walked into the closing walkthrough, and they were like, "Holy shit, what do we buy?"
It's a
It's
disaster.
like, it wasn't even that bad.
Oh, it just
but,
wasn't
like,
what they thought.
wasn't what they thought,
Yeah.
right? You're
Okay.
like, holy, I paid a premium for this, and I against 2 people on it, right?
Yeah.
Those days are over.
Okay.
And, maybe we'll see them again in some other time, but people just got to get like practical, right? Like there's always going to be a price that somebody's willing to pay for it. The market speaks to us.
Okay. So when someone is considering a condo, right? Imagine I'm a client, right, coming from Canada. I'm familiar with South Florida, but I'm not familiar with properties here. And I'm like, listen, I want to engage you guys as my realtors. Find me a condo. I have a budget of $1 million, right? What when you do that first sit down with the client, what are the top things you're going to educate that client on?
Well, I think the first thing it's like, what are their top wants, right? Like, do they care about amenities? Do they want a view? How many bedrooms?
I want it
Like
all.
all those
I
things.
want
Of course, everybody
12
always wants
pools.
it all.
Me, I always start with budget. And then I work
Yeah,
Yeah, of
backwards.
course. You go with
But-
budget, but you're
Yeah.
already usually when
I
you
get
sit
it.
down,
I
that's
have
like your
I have
first
$1 million
thing, right? Like
bucks.
you got $1
Yeah.
million bucks. Okay, like now what's important to you within that $1 million, right?
Right.
Like what areas did you
Okay.
want? What are your like non-negotiables, right? And what would be like your wish list? And somewhere in there, then you can start kind of like finding those properties.
Okay.
Also considering, if we're talking about like investment, like somebody that wants an Airbnb, I would tell them
Well, no,
condos
just
are out.
yeah, just a personal use property, like something I'm going to
Yeah.
use for myself. It's my family's
Look,
going to come. You know what I mean?
Obviously, location is like the first most important thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I personally struggle with buyers from Canada,
Mm-hmm.
don't know where they want to be,
Right.
and have like never been here, or maybe like taken a trip here once and are like, should I go to Naples? Should
Yeah.
I go to Orlando? Should I go to Miami?
Right. Right.
And I struggle with that because there's so much variety, right? If you
Right.
you think of South Florida alone, we talked about population numbers. Let's call it 6.2 million,
Yeah.
which is roughly around what the GTA is.
Yeah.
Well, South Florida is 112 miles long,
Right.
right? And at the max 20 miles wide, and in some places 5 miles wide.
Right.
So think of it long and skinny. It's a long
Yeah.
distance, and you have this beachfront that runs across, and
The
you have
entire state. Right.
Yeah.
heavily populated cultural cities like Miami, where it's all about entertainment and nightlife, and you got guys buying golden steaks for $1,500
Right.
and drizzling like
Yeah. Yeah.
gold flakes on it, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and partying until like
Yeah. Yeah.
8 in the morning, right? To
Right.
like maybe Fort Lauderdale, that's sort of like a little bit in between big city,
Right.
big city, small town feel, right?
Got it.
Or small city, big town feel, I think is what I normally say, right? Or Boca Raton, where it's a little bit more, getting more family oriented and a little bit of a younger demographic, but traditionally more golf and country club. And, New York, let's retire to Boca, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's somebody that's like never been down here or like they are not familiar with the area, so
Right.
it's like, where do you think you want to be?
Right.
Okay.
So
what,
to like you
what
want
would
to be
you want as a lifestyle? And then from there, if you have no idea, let's take a drive. Let
Yeah,
me show you a few places, like a few areas. Let's not even look at properties. Let me show you areas that kind of like fit with the lifestyle that you want to have.
So like Miami is obviously going to be entertainment, bigger city, kind of cosmopolitan, lots of people from around the world,
Correct.
fancy restaurants.
Yeah.
Maybe overwhelming.
Could be overwhelming. Probably not the best for families with small kids.
Yeah, yesterday I showed one of my listings that, knock on
There's wood
something
somewhere here. Right?
but to an MLB player that just got transferred over to the Marlins, and he was with his wife about to have twins, and they don't want to do the Miami thing,
Right.
so they're like, hey, Boca Raton, it's quiet, gated community, private, works for us, good schools, family oriented, but you still have the high end restaurants. And it's funny, their agent that represented it was pitching it to them as, this is the Beverly Hills of Florida,
Right. I
of
get it.
South Florida. I don't know if maybe a little bit of the Beverly Hills
Yeah.
feel.
Interesting.
I never really thought of it that way, but that was, and this was yesterday.
But I guess the idea is like getting away from the action. But I mean, realistically, let's say I wanted to get away from Miami, right? Because it's just a little too much. If I get something here in Fort Lauderdale, I mean, getting over to Miami is nothing.
No, yeah.
No,
It's
well, that's the
And
whole
that's
thing.
this-
Hey, you're in Miami in 30 minutes.
Yeah, you
Right.
still have access to the Miami, like, if you want to go out for a night
Right.
or you want to go for a weekend or whatever, it's still
Right.
accessible. You're not like 2-hour drive, but yeah, it depends on your lifestyle. I think like Fort Lauderdale's kind of like a little bit like in between. You can go to Palm Beach in 30 minutes or you can go to Miami in 30 minutes.
Yeah, so it's
you're right in
kind
the
of like a
middle.
central hub.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons there's a lot of interest in this area for personal use property. Now, we touched a lot on the condos, and I guess the big thing with the condos is, I would assume you should be looking into the condo a little bit more deeply, because there could be variation from condo to condo in the
Mhm.
sense that, hey, okay, we don't have a huge HOA fee at this particular in this particular building, but it's older, and if you double check, they have zero reserve. So
Right.
so there's some sort of a ticking time bomb coming up there. We know that property taxes are going to be high relative to what Canadians are used to, regardless of the type of property. Now, this brings me to a single family home or a townhouse, which is kind of a condo anyways,
They
right?
classify them in homes, but it's really more of a
It's more of a condo. Is it
and
a
it's really more because of the management, and usually
right,
the
right.
townhome will
Okay.
come with some type of a homeowners association, which you'll get that in single family homes as well. There's a lot of
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that.
gated
Yeah.
communities which will have restrictions as well.
Okay.
And in certain areas like Boca Raton also come with like mandatory membership fees. So I'll get calls and say, "Hey, look at this house I can get for 800 grand. It's 4,000 square feet. It's decked out. It's on a."
Right.
But guess what? You got $100,000 buy-in, and you got about a 30G a year
Membership fee.
membership fee, and mandatory food and beverage minimum at the club, and
I got it. I got
golf
it.
and all these things. And you know what? It's not, again, it's a lifestyle decision.
Right.
That may work. We don't particularly have a lot of clients fit into that lifestyle.
Right.
We actually worked with a buyer recently, came from Chicago, relocation, very similar type city to Toronto, and they were really set. He was like, I want the safety of a gated community. I want to be in West Boca. I want the golf club community. Guess what? You know what? They ended up in a non-HOA,
Right.
non-gated. I think it had a small HOA, but non-gated, non-golf community, because that's what worked best with their budget.
Right.
And, I think to Anna's point is, let's go for a drive. Get down here. We start with that consultation call. It's great that we have FaceTime and Zoom. This is the value that we bring as real estate advisors, is to really understand what the needs are of the buyer. And then, how serious are you, and how committed are you to buying a property in Florida?
Right.
We've had investors for primaries, for hybrids, for pure investment, and some have come down several times. And once they actually come down here and see it and go around with us, and it's an interview at the end of the day, right? They're interviewing us, we're interviewing them, because we're busy, and and we want to work with buyers who are committed to working with us.
Exactly.
And
Okay.
So yeah, it did, but I kind of wanted to segue into the
primaries and hybrids, you
difference.
talked about townhomes.
No, the difference between buying a condo and a home. So this kind of goes perfectly into that hybrid use,
Mm-hmm.
that use scenario where, okay, let's say I do have some money to buy a property here, but I can't afford to keep it going completely on my own. My understanding is condos are off limits, pretty much.
Yeah. Condos are pretty much off limits, with the exception of some like buildings that now in Miami are like allowing Airbnbs, and buildings that are new that are being built for that purpose. Like that's how they're being advertised, of like, you can buy this ultra luxury building and we will allow you to Airbnb it. And they have already in-house programs, and they kind of like make it easy. But obviously that comes with a cost. I would say here in Fort Lauderdale and in Palm Beach, it's very difficult to find a condo, if I would say almost like impossible. I'm not going to say like never, but that would allow Airbnb. So Airbnb for condo is out. I would even say
Don't even think about
Airbnb for a townhouse is out. Anything that has an HOA attached to it, it's pretty much going to have very strict restrictions on renting it out. Some may allow a 6-month rental. So you might be able to have a condo and rent it out for 6 months, or they might have like a 3-month rental minimum. But then those are tricky, right? Like, how do you find somebody who wants something just for 6 months? Or how do you find somebody that wants something for just like 3 months? So that's out. So I'd say you want like a hybrid property, you're looking into a single family home.
Okay. Without an HOA.
Without an HOA.
without an HOA.
Yeah, HOAs come with restrictions. So single family homes are your Airbnb thing. Now, that doesn't mean that every single family home is a perfect Airbnb, right?
Right.
The market is saturated for Airbnbs down here. And
So it's an idea that like people think, oh, I'm just going to buy this property,
Correct.
Airbnb it, cover my costs, maybe make a bit of a profit
Yeah.
and use it whenever I want. You know, it's kind of a pipe dream.
Yeah, but look,
I mean, it's doable.
It's good in a way because, like you said, when you open this up, these platforms have enabled opportunities for buyers who never would have been able to buy a home here in Florida in the first place, right? So, you know, the Airbnbs, the verbal's always been there. I think back to 1994.
It's been around for a long time.
Been around for a long, long time.
I had
It's just
no idea about that.
yeah. It's been around for
But
decades.
Airbnb took it to the next level, right? Where it became like now people don't even say short-term rental,
They call it an
vacation rental. They say I'm going to
no matter what
Airbnb
it
this
is,
place, right?
Yeah, and there's always been people who have privately rented out their properties. Like I remember coming down here in 1994 with my buddy, you know, Dave
Yeah.
from Gatonero
Yeah.
in Richmond Hill.
Yeah.
And we rented a little home right here off Commercial Boulevard, like probably about 5-minute drive from where I now live.
Yeah.
And we rented it off some woman, Brenda, and it was in an old age community. We paid her, I don't know, $1,000 for the summer.
Yeah.
And she wasn't using it in the summer because snowbirds use it in the winter. They covered their taxes and whatever by renting it out. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Same
also
idea.
like what's the goal, right? Of like the investor. Like I
Right.
want to have a home that I want to use, and then all I need is to cover just my expenses, right? All I want to do is cover my taxes and like recoup a little bit of the cost. Then okay, cool. If you are looking to actually like pay off your home by renting it, I think you need to be very specific of what you want, what you have to buy. You can't just buy like a random house with not care about the location. Like you have to have a home that's gonna drive those people to rent
So
it.
it
right?
has to be in a very
So
heavy
location.
tourist area.
Well,
Yeah,
not even that it has to be like a tourist area. It's just location, right? You need proximity to the beach within, I would say, 2 miles, and it has to, and you need to make that home. Like, how is that home going to be attractive? Like, you can't just put like, you know, IKEA furniture. I'm not saying that you have to spend $1 million furnishing it, but how are you going to make that home kind of like give you that vacation vibe? It's going to be cute. Is it going to be family friendly? Like, you really need to understand like who your clientele is going to be.
Right.
And also kind of have an idea that then this is also an investment property and you can't have a lot of like your personal stuff there. And like, you know, think about all those things.
So it's got to be like almost like a hybrid hotel. Like the way I see it is if someone's going to choose your Airbnb property as a vacation property, they've got to get all the amenities that they would get at a hotel at a better price and be able to jam more people in there, like maybe 2 families.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, listen, hotels are expensive, right? But it's about brand, it's about reviews and reputation, right? And it takes time to build that up. How are you branding your casita, right? What are you going to call it? How do you attract people? Are the pictures, I mean, it's just like marketing a property for sale. You're marketing it for short-term rental,
But constant.
Right? Yeah. And then mentally understanding that if it's hybrid and you want to use it, that people are going to break your shit. You're going to see on the camera every once in a while, someone's going to have a party and you're going to get anxiety.
And the cops are going to get called or
the
whatever.
cops are going to get called and your neighbors are going to get
And then
pissed
you also
off
have to take
because-
into consideration who's going to be managing this, right? Like you're gone, you're out.
Or you can't manage it, basically.
Right? So like, and you can't, but people try to self-manage. It's like, oh, I got my cleaning person. I just call them when it's done and I'm going to manage. Like you need help. Like it's not easy. You need help. You need somebody that if something goes wrong during a stay, like, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about, you guys are going to talk about property manament in another series, but look, I think those are all considerations. And then also the cost of carrying a single family home, right?
Right.
Just then you're getting into the insurance
the roof, the this, the that.
Insurance game.
Maintenance,
Yeah.
I mean, so it is possible then.
We have somebody coming in to talk to us tomorrow about insurance, but like if you go legit and you get the insurance that that it's a rental property, well, that insurance is really, really expensive.
Right.
Like I see a lot of these guys running these short-term rentals are underinsured,
Right.
they're not carrying the proper policy, right? And you see that with insurance across the board, right? Is like you're paying, but are you really covered for what in the event? And this is the U.S. Everybody sues.
Yeah.
So we actually have a very close friend of ours who we sold a property to that, you know, was starting out as a hybrid that eventually they want to use more and more and settle down here in South Florida.
Right.
And they actually killed doing short-term rentals because of the cost of insurance.
Okay.
They're
So
like,
the
this
cost,
doesn't make sense to me.
so financially
this.
plus the headaches just didn't make sense.
It's a lot.
No, so now they have a couple friends and families.
Yeah. So now
couple
they're
people that
doing
have-
short-term rental 90-day minimum, which then
Okay.
the insurance comes down. But when you're
Okay.
having people coming in and out, the insurance
Yeah, for the
cost
weekend or what,
goes a lot higher.
which makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
which
higher
makes sense.
risk, right?
Okay, so I mean, it is possible to do. Scratch it, like short-term rentals, Airbnbs. When it comes to South Florida and a condo,
Mhm.
is a pipe dream. Like, forget about it.
Yes.
Pretty much, don't even think about it.
Yeah, unless you're looking like Anna was saying,
Unless there's like one or two
Specific.
very
You're in-
specific
Yeah.
properties that allow it.
right, and you're in that Miami condo hotel thing,
Right,
where
right,
they're
right.
building them, they're furnishing them.
Got it.
It's like-
got it.
Well, what's going to happen 2 years from now when those are up and now you have all this inventory?
Right.
But Miami's booming and, you know, they're condo hotels, and then you have the hotels that are lobbying against it because they're eating into their business.
Yeah, and that could change on a, like, you know, the laws can be, or the regulations can change on
Yeah,
a dime.
Yeah,
that's
look, you
ever
guys had it
changing,
happen
yeah.
in Toronto,
Toronto,
where they
yeah.
changed the regulations.
Right.
There's certain cities here that have already implemented ordinances and bylaws against Airbnbs, right? Like,
Right.
look, we have one behind us. We had one across the street. The neighbors,
Yeah.
they hate it, right?
I
Not
don't
in my
think- I don't
backyard,
think
right?
it
I think-
depends, right? Like it depends on the price point and the kind of people that you're going to bring in, right?
Right.
But it's always
But ultimately, a single family home is the more viable option
for
for
sure.
this. But you have to make
You
sure
have to be
that
strategic about it.
yeah, you have to be strategic. You have got to run it like a business, and you have to make sure that you are lined up with the costs
Yeah.
beforehand.
And I also
Right.
think you should look at like what's available in the area, right? And
Right.
like how you're going to, like while you're buying, like use that inspection period or whatever, if you're like gung ho about doing it, what's in the area? How am I going to compete with these people? What's the price point? How much is going to be my cost to then profit from it? And really understand like what you need to put in to be able to make a return, right? Like what amenities you're going to offer, all of that. Insurance costs we touched on, and there's a lot of things that depend on that, right? Like your roof, your windows, like your hurricane protection, all of that is huge. And I think a lot of buyers don't think about that, of the fact like, okay, impact windows make a difference in your insurance. The age of your
Right.
roof make an impact on your insurance. And I would say like if you're financing the home, the short-term rental thing, I think it's pretty much out too. Or you have to like kind of disclose it, because then if you get caught, there's like a whole
Right,
other
right.
thing. So these are pretty much cash
Right,
deals if
depends
you're
on what
doing-
type of loan you're
Yeah,
getting, right? You're always
no.
going to have the guy who grabs a primary loan and tries to do it as an
Yeah.
investment. Maybe you
Got
can
it.
do that once.
But if
But-
you get caught,
If you get audited, you know, they'll call your loan.
okay. So
And then obviously we didn't talk about primaries yet, but the other factor to consider too is like, this isn't your house.
right,
So you're going to have that buyer who can afford a second home and just doesn't care and doesn't want anybody
yes,
sleeping in their bed.
Yep.
Even if they got to change their sheet,
Yep.
can afford it. And, you know, think of it as like instead of having a cottage, or it's your winter cottage
right.
in South Florida, right?